What's up, everyone? What's going on? Hope you had a good weekend. My weekend was not that good, because Friday I got the news about Roddy Piper passing away. So that really sucked. Saturday night got a lot better, watching Ronda Rousey fight and destroy that bitch in 34 seconds and knock her ass out. So that was great. And that put me in a much better mood than thinking about Roddy Piper passing, because that was very tragic and sad. But it was nice to watch UFC and see Ronda Rousey fight last night and win. So I'm happy that fight happened, and I'm happy that fight was gonna happen, and I'm glad it happened right after Piper's death, so it could get my hopes up and put a smile on my face. This video, I talked about on my last video my thoughts on the passing of Roddy Piper. This video is my tribute to Roddy Piper. This is my tribute to him. I will talk about his career and everything he did in his wrestling career and some of his life. So I'm going to kick it off talking about he was born on April 17th, 1954. He was born in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, in Canada. He was raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. He was expelled from junior high for having a switchblade on him. That shows you right there, when Roddy Piper was in junior high, he was already a rebel. And he was already starting his character back then in junior high. So he was expelled from junior high. And then after he's expelled, he had a falling out with his father. And he started living in youth hostels. Took him in. So he had a place to stay. And then he was a very young man, and he started playing, and he picked up playing the bagpipes, and he became number 5 in the world at playing the bagpipes. So he was the real deal. Playing the bagpipes, when he would talk about that wasn't any bullshit. That wasn't a gimmick. That was real stuff. That was the real deal. Piper was the real deal. The guy didn't lie about anything. So he was number 5 in the world at playing the bagpipes. That's very impressive. And then after he became very good at playing the bagpipes and became number 5 in the world, Piper started amateur wrestling, and he was boxing before he became a professional wrestler. He actually won the Golden Gloves in boxing, and he won a boxing championship, and he was awarded a black belt in judo from training with a judo trainer. So he had a black belt in judo. He had the Golden Gloves in boxing and a boxing championship. He was an amateur wrestler before a pro wrestler, and he was number 5 in the world at playing the bagpipes. So he already did a lot of great stuff, and he was very successful already in his life before he got into wrestling. And I'm sure Roddy Piper was very driven before he got into pro wrestling to succeed, and not to become homeless and become a drug addict, a loser. So he did great stuff before pro wrestling. And at age 15 years old, he made his professional wrestling debut. At age 15 in 1969, he lost his first match at age 15 to Larry the Axe Hennig, Mr. Perfect's father. He lost to Larry the Axe Hennig in a match lasted only 10 seconds. And Roddy Piper said on his DVD that the WWE put out of him, the match was the fastest match in that arena's history. And Larry the Axe Hennig was probably very stiff with him, and I think he broke his nose. And Piper lost in 10 seconds. From 1973, after a couple years later, after he debuted, from 1973 to 1975, Rowdy Piper lost a lot of matches in the AWA when he worked there. And then by late 1975 and early 1976, Roddy Piper was a top villain for Mike and Gene LeBeau's NWA Hollywood Wrestling promotion in Los Angeles. And in Los Angeles, Roddy Piper would feud with Chavo Guerrero Sr., the father of Chavo Guerrero Jr. He would feud with Chavo Sr., and as well, he would feud with the whole Guerrero family while he was in Los Angeles. And probably San Francisco also. In 1977 and 78, Piper developed the Rowdy character in his time in Roy Schreier's NWA San Francisco Wrestling. Piper continuously badmouthed and angered the Mexican community, and to give back to them so they would forgive him, he promised to play the Mexican national anthem on his bagpipes. Instead, because he was a top villain and to get a lot of heat, instead Roddy Piper, instead of playing the Mexican national anthem, he played La Cucaracha on his bagpipes. That's crazy. I'm sure he got crazy heat for doing that. And that's Roddy Piper. That's a classic story, and that's just unbelievable. And that shows you right there, he was a rebel and he was controversial even in 1977 and 78. To play La Cucaracha on the bagpipes, to piss off the Mexican community and the Mexican people in California, that took a lot of balls for Roddy Piper to do that. But he did it. I'm sure he did it out of no hate towards any race. I'm sure he just did it to get a lot of heat and become hated in wrestling because he wanted to become the top heel. And he was driven to become the top heel, to do something like that. To play La Cucaracha on the bagpipes, you gotta have a lot of balls. And obviously, he wanted to be a top heel in wrestling. And he wanted to get noticed by a major company, I'm sure. So, from 1980 to 1983, Rowdy Piper worked for Georgia Championship Wrestling and Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. He feuded with Bob Armstrong, Dick Slater, Tommy Rich, and during the summer of 1982, Roddy Piper became a fan favorite after knocking out Don Morocco. So after that, he did that to Don Morocco, the fans started to love him. And he was a fan favorite big time in the NWA in Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Summer of 1983. Just trying to figure out what to talk about next. Summer of 1983. Roddy Piper, he left for a little bit, I guess after 82. In the summer he left. He came back to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, I think that was their name. He came back in the summer of 83. Piper moved back into Jim Crockett Promotions, and he feuded with a couple guys, a couple legends like Sergeant Slaughter. He feuded with him. He had a feud with Ric Flair a very good feud in 1983 over the NWA United States Championship. And he also feuded with Greg Valentine. He wasn't known as a Hammer then, but he was just Greg Valentine. They had a famous dog collar match at the first Starrcade event, Starrcade 83. Everybody knows that Greg Valentine and Roddy Piper had an epic dog collar match. It was bloody, it was insane, it was brutal, it was violent. It was very violent for 1983. Roddy Piper busted his eardrum, and his ear was bleeding profusely. It would not stop. Piper's super tough. He was super tough. After Starrcade 83, he just became more of a fan favorite because the fans respected the hell out of him for that dog collar match. And it was a great match also. It wasn't just violence and bloody. It wasn't just blood and guts and violence. It was a good match also at Starrcade 83. So after Starrcade 83, the WWF and Vince McMahon Jr. was in control of the WWF as he bought it from his father, and he wanted top talent from around the country, from all these different promotions. He took a lot of top talent from the AWA. Guys like Mean Gene, Hulk Hogan, Jesse Ventura, Adrian Adonis. He took all the AWA's top talent. Vince McMahon got Rowdy Piper in the WWF from 1984 to 1987, his first run in the WWF. And he did some great stuff in his first run. In 84, he came in. 1984 in the WWF, and he came in as a manager. And he was a heel. He was a damn good heel. He could talk on the microphone. For the guys he managed Mr. Wonderful, Paul Orndorff, and Dr. David Schultz. David Schultz is that idiot that slapped the 2020 reporter when he asked if wrestling was fake, and then he slapped him across the face super hard and knocked the guy on the ground and then yelled at him, "Does that feel fake to you? Is that fake?" or something like that. And I'm sure he got his ass sued. David Schultz got sued, and then he got fired from the WWF because that was a really dumb move for him to do, and I'm sure the WWF even got sued. So he managed Paul Orndorff, and he talked for him because he was a great talker. There was nobody on the microphone as good or as more hated than Roddy Piper was in '84. The guy could out-talk anybody on the microphone, and he could own anybody on the microphone. And Roddy Piper was dropping pipe bombs way before CM Punk was. So, as I said, his first run in the WWF lasted from 1984 to 1987. And of course, everybody knows he main evented the first WrestleMania. Nobody can ever take that away from Roddy Piper. He was in the first ever main event of WrestleMania. And now WrestleMania is as big as ever. It's a global phenomenon. So he has that forever. That will be forever with Roddy Piper, that he was in the first main event of WrestleMania. And then WrestleMania 2, after WrestleMania 1, WrestleMania 2, he would feud and talk trash about Mr. T and just destroy Mr. T on the microphone. Before WrestleMania 2, he destroyed him in promos. He put down Mr. T. He put down everything about him. He didn't like Mr. T. He ripped him every time, every chance he got, he ripped Mr. T on the microphone. Piper did not like Mr. T because he felt he had no respect for pro wrestling and that he shouldn't even been there, but he was. And Piper felt like, as one of the boys, one of the wrestlers, he felt like he had to basically had to own Mr. T and put Mr. T in his place. Because I'm sure Mr. T had a huge ego. I'm sure he had a huge ego because he had the hit show that he was on, the A-Team. So I'm sure he had a big-time ego because of that show. And he was a big TV star. So Roddy Piper, I'm sure, got in a lot of arguments and told Mr. T to put his ego in check, check his ego at the door, and don't bring that ego into the WWF. And Roddy Piper really taught Mr. T a lesson to respect pro wrestling and the wrestlers in the back. So after WrestleMania 2, he would start Piper's Pits. He started them, I think, before WrestleMania 2. Probably 1984, 85, he started Piper's Pits. And he was great, and he was epic on the microphone, and he could rip any talent that was on his show. He could out-talk them and outsmart them, and he was really hated. But then in 86, he became a babyface. I think when Bob Orton turned on Roddy Piper, he turned on him and attacked him. So him and Bob Orton would have a feud, and I think they had a match on Saturday Night's Main Event. And then Roddy Piper would go into a feud with his former partner and the guy he used to manage, Paul Orndorff. They had a match on Saturday Night's Main Event, I believe, in 86. So Piper became really loved in 1986 after WrestleMania 2. Going into 1987, it was still probably 85. I mean, some just great catchphrases Roddy Piper had. When Andre the Giant once was on Piper's Pit, he says to Andre, "Where are you from?" And Andre was pissed off, and he didn't look in a very good mood, and he said to Roddy Piper, "None of your business." And then Roddy Piper said, "Oh, okay, I see you're tall, big man, but tiny little brain." And then Andre picked him up by the shirt and basically picked Roddy Piper off his feet, and it was great stuff. And he owned people on the microphone on Piper's Pit. Nobody in the wrestling business could touch Roddy Piper ever on the microphone. Nobody. And then he had a famous Piper's Pit in 1987 before WrestleMania 3, where he had Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan on. And Hogan got a giant trophy for being champion for 3 years. And they gave Andre a smaller trophy for being undefeated for 15 years. And then Bobby Heenan came out the next week on a Piper's Pit, and he said, "Andre the Giant, why'd Andre get a smaller trophy than Hogan?" And then Bobby Heenan basically got in Andre's head and got Andre to join him and turn heel. So then Andre joined Bobby the Brain Heenan. And then Hogan came out on the Piper's Pit, and Hogan was on the microphone saying to Andre, "This can't be true, this can't be true. Why are you listening to Bobby Heenan? He's brainwashing you. I thought we were friends." And Hogan was just basically in shock that Andre was turning on him. And then Bobby Heenan got on the microphone and says, why'd you never give Andre a title shot? Were you scared of him? You never gave this man a title shot. And then Andre got on the microphone and grabbed Hogan by his chin and lifted his chin up and said, "Look at me when I'm talking to you. I'm here to challenge you for a championship match at WrestleMania 3. And the crowd went crazy. And then Hogan says on the microphone, "I don't believe it. This isn't you, Andre. I can't believe this." And then Bobby Heenan gets on the mic and says, "You don't believe it? Believe this, Hogan." And then Andre rips the yellow and red Hulkamania shirt off Hogan and rips his cross off. And then Hogan was cut on his chest from the cross, so he's bleeding. And then Roddy Piper got down by Hogan with the microphone, touched his chest and says, "You're bleeding." That was just great stuff. Great Piper's Pit to set up Hogan versus Andre at WrestleMania 3. So that was just awesome stuff. And then Piper went into a feud with Adrian Adonis to set up WrestleMania 3. They had the Flower Shop, which was Adrian Adonis' talk show against Piper's Pit. And before WrestleMania 3, I have to mention the Piper's Pit with Jimmy Superfly Snuka, where Roddy Piper was basically ripping him and just ripping him and owning him on the microphone, saying, grabbing coconuts and what the hell are that other fruit called? I can't even remember what the other fruit is, but he was basically ripping on, getting a little bit racist, saying, here's all these bananas. He's throwing bananas at Jimmy Snuka, saying, "You like bananas, huh? You like bananas?" And then saying, "This is how you like your women, with a lot of hair on top and a big round body." He was just ripping and owning Jimmy Snuka, and Jimmy Snuka wouldn't say a word on the microphone. Then Roddy Piper said, "Aren't you going to talk? Don't you have anything to say? Or cat got your tongue?" And then he, I do not think that Jimmy Snuka knew that this was coming. When he smashed a coconut over his head, and Jimmy Snuka went down like a ton of bricks, and he took the entire Piper's Pit set down. I'm pretty sure he was probably really dazed, and he was seeing stars, and he probably even had a concussion from that. So then Jimmy Snuka finally gets up. He was super pissed and angry, and Roddy Piper, he knew his dressing room door was right there, so he went in his dressing room door and he slammed it and he held it shut, because Jimmy Snuka ran and charged it and tried to knock the door down. But he didn't have any success knocking it down. So that was just an epic moment, hitting Jimmy Snuka with that coconut. That absolutely put Piper over, and just doing that pushed him like crazy as a top heel and a top villain. So that was great. And then another one, with his great sayings, with Andre the Giant in a Piper's Pit. He got on the microphone and said, "You don't throw rocks at a man with a machine gun." Just great catchphrases that he would come up with that were epic, and nobody else could come up with epic catchphrases like Roddy Piper except for Roddy Piper. So, WrestleMania 3, it was billed as his retirement match against Adrian Adonis. He defeats Adrian Adonis, and then everybody thought he was retiring. And he got a great farewell from the crowd at WrestleMania 3. And he wasn't retiring from wrestling, but I think he wanted to leave to take at least two years off to just rest up. He's probably burnt out. He's on the road a long time before 87 without a break. I mean, Jesse Ventura tweeted on Friday that Roddy Piper once worked 90 days in a row for the WWF. That is insane. I can't imagine doing that, but Piper did it. And so he left WWF after WrestleMania 3. He left to do the great, legendary, epic, classic movie They Live. And Vince McMahon did not want Piper to leave to do They Live. He did not want Piper to leave and get over on his own. And basically Vince McMahon was pissed off because Roddy Piper was gonna basically make a living by himself, and Vince McMahon could not own Roddy Piper. He could not. He never could. He could never control Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper is a rebel. He didn't listen to anybody. He did what was best for him and his family. So he went to do They Live in 87 and probably 88. And it came out in 1988. They Live is awesome. It's one of my favorite movies. And if you have not seen They Live, get it on DVD. It's well worth it. And in that movie, he came up with some epic catchphrases. I think he went in a bank where and he had his sunglasses on, so some of the people were aliens and some were not. He came in with a shotgun and he stops and he says, "I'm here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum." And then he started shooting the aliens that were disguised as humans, but they were aliens. So that was awesome. Roddy Piper came up with that himself. "I'm here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." That was just great stuff from Roddy Piper. So he would return and come back to the WWF in 1989. He came back for his second run, 89 to 1992. And he feuded with guys like Rick Rude. He had a feud with in most of the year in 89. From SummerSlam Survivor Series, they feuded. Royal Rumble, 1990. He was in the Royal Rumble match. Him and Bad News Brown both. I think Bad News Brown pulled Roddy Piper by the hair and eliminated him, so they both started brawling to the back. So in 1990, Piper feuded with Bad News Brown. They would have a match, very memorable at WrestleMania 6. It wasn't that great of a match, but what Roddy Piper did was memorable. He had half his body painted black, and the other half was painted white. That was really controversial. You could not do that in today's age at all. So being painted half black and white, that was insane. But Roddy Piper did it because he was a rebel. And he also did it, I'm sure, to get people talking about Roddy Piper. I mean, it was controversial, but it was good for Roddy Piper's career to do that type of stuff, to be controversial, because he knew people would be talking about him and wrestling. I don't know if this video is going to go 20 more minutes. It probably will. I don't know how long I'm going to talk, but I have pretty much more stuff to say about Roddy Piper and his career. So, after 1990, after WrestleMania 6, he was gone for a little bit. In 1990 SummerSlam, he started working as a commentator with Vince McMahon on pay-per-views. Him and Vince called SummerSlam 90, and Roddy Piper and Gorilla Monsoon called Survivor Series 90, and then Roddy Piper called Royal Rumble 91 with Gorilla Monsoon, I believe. So he became a commentator after WrestleMania 6, and he was a pretty good commentator. I enjoyed him on the mic because he was entertaining anytime he talked. And then he would return to the ring. In 1991, he would return before Survivor Series 91. He returned to Madison Square Garden, and he wrestled Ric Flair in, I think, October 91 at Madison Square Garden. That was a great match. It's available on the network if you want to watch it, in the old school section of the network. Ric Flair versus Roddy Piper. I believe it was Ric Flair's first match in Madison Square Garden, and maybe his first match Again, I think it was his first match against Roddy Piper in the WWF. So Ric Flair and Roddy Piper in October 91, I think it was October, in late 91, they had a very entertaining match in Madison Square Garden. As I said, it's on the network, in the old school section. And then Survivor Series 91, he would be on a team with Bret Hart and the British Bulldog, and Flair was on the other team, and he would get in the ring again with Ric Flair, and he was feuding with Ric Flair, and they had some great matches. And Flair versus Piper one-on-one was always great stuff. And they were always entertaining matches. 1992 would come around in Royal Rumble 1992, where Roddy Piper won his first WWF Championship title. He would win the Intercontinental Championship from the Mountie. And then after he won the IC title, he was entered into the Royal Rumble 92. And he would come out in the Rumble 92 to a huge pop and huge ovation because he just won the Intercontinental title. And he would only hold the Intercontinental Championship from January 92 until April. And what he did for Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8 was really, really great. Roddy Piper passed the torch to Bret Hart. He really did. He passed the torch to Bret Hart. I'm sure he gave a lot of guidance and a lot of help to Bret Hart their time in the WWF. Bret Hart said in a statement that he was just really, really, really devastated by the passing of Roddy Piper, and that Roddy Piper was his mentor. So, I mean, just think about what Roddy Piper did for Bret Hart, putting Bret Hart over at WrestleMania 8. That was awesome. And Roddy Piper had no ego when it came to business in the ring and what was right. I mean, I don't think he ever lost. He lost to Hogan, but I think it was by disqualifications. Hogan never beat him. Never pinned him 1, 2, 3. And he had no ego when he put over Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8. And he probably put over a lot of other guys. And I'll talk about his WCW days and when he defeated Hulk Hogan in WCW. So I don't even think in WCW that Hulk Hogan ever beat Roddy Piper 1, 2, 3. I don't think it ever happened. So that's one guy Hulk Hogan never defeated. And he has defeated every top star in the business. Not everybody, but almost every top star he has defeated. But Hulk Hogan has never defeated 1, 2, 3, never pinned his shoulders to the mat. He never pinned Roddy Piper. So, after 1992, Roddy Piper would leave the WWF again, but he would return in 1994 for a short program with Jerry the King Lawler. And he did a couple promos about Jerry Lawler, and it was great stuff. In their match, they had a match at King of the Ring 94, was not very good, but it wasn't Piper's fault. It wasn't really Jerry Lawler's fault. They just did not click in the ring together. So Roddy Piper is back from 94 to 96 in the WWF. He refereed a match at WrestleMania 10, and he also refereed another match at WrestleMania 11. And he worked King of the Ring 94. And then in 1996, when WWF President Gorilla Monsoon was taken out by Vader, Roddy Piper would become the WWF President in 1996, going into WrestleMania 12. And then Goldust would start calling out Piper He did these backstage segments where he was blowing on the bagpipes, and it was some racy, uncomfortable stuff to watch. But Goldust pushed the envelope like no other could back in '96. And Goldust even wrote in a tweet that his match with Piper at WrestleMania 12 made Goldust. So big praise there from Dustin. Goldust. So he was a president in '96 for a short time, and then I don't know what happened after Roddy Piper had an epic brawl, Hollywood backlot brawl. It was great. After that match, he just disappeared and was never the president and never shown. I guess he wasn't the president again because Gorilla Monsoon was returning to be president. Because Gorilla was still the president a little bit. He was still on TV in '97 as president. So Piper knew Vince McMahon was not going to be using him full time anymore, or hardly at all anymore, because they had nothing. WWF had nothing for Piper, I guess, because they thought he was an old guy. So I believe Piper called Vince McMahon and told him that, or Vince McMahon called him after he saw Piper on WCW Halloween Havoc '96 when Piper made his WCW debut, and talked on the microphone talked to Hogan right in his face and said to Hogan, "You never beat me." And Vince called him and said, "I saw you on WCW." And then Piper explained on his DVD and said to Vince over the phone, what was I supposed to do? You weren't using me. He had to make a living, so he went to WCW, and I don't blame him. His run in WCW lasted from 1996 to the year 2000. And he would become WCW United States champion in 1999, I think, after defeating Scott Hall, I think, at a Super Brawl event in '99. At least, I think that's what year he won the U.S. title. So he won the U.S. title in WCW. And he had 3 pay-per-view matches with Hulk Hogan. And he feuded with Ric Flair in '99. And he had a couple matches on pay-per-view against Ric Flair. WCW did not, they did use Piper the right way when he went against Hogan. But after that, WCW did not know what to do with Roddy Piper. And they just wasted his talents away. And it was sad, because Piper is better than what they were giving him. But Piper was towards the end of his wrestling career for sure in WCW. He did not wrestle much at all after WCW. So he would return to the WWE in the year 2003 at WrestleMania 19, where he was disguised and dressed up and had a hoodie on. Took the hoodie off and had a pipe, and he hit Hulk Hogan in the head with the pipe and cost Hulk Hogan the match against Mr. McMahon at WrestleMania 19. So Roddy Piper is back in the WWE, and it was awesome. I loved it. I loved seeing him back. I was happy he was back. And then he would do a couple Piper's Pits in 2003 with Vince McMahon, and Mr. McMahon character came on Piper's Pit, and they went at it on the mic. And then you'd have a Piper's Pit with Mr. America, a.k.a. Hulk Hogan under a mask. Everybody knew that. It was obvious. It was super obvious. Before he came back to the WWE in 2003, Roddy Piper worked for TNA, NWA TNA, TNA Wrestling. He was there and made his debut on pay-per-view on September 17th, 2003. Roddy Piper made his TNA debut, and he was on the microphone, and he ripped Vince Russo and talked about him. And then Piper would stay around for a little bit. In January 2005, Roddy Piper was the referee for a Jeff Hardy versus Scott Hall match on TNA pay-per-view in January 05. And then he would leave TNA Wrestling. And as I said, he returned to WWF in WWE in 2003. And then Roddy Piper would get released after being back for only a couple months. I think he was released in July or August 2003. WWE released him because of a stupid interview that HBO did with Roddy Piper, where basically Piper told the truth in the interview and said promoters don't do anything for wrestlers, and he basically said when they're done with you, they take you behind the barn and they shoot you in the head. And I guess he said some other stuff that he was back in the WWE because he could not get his retirement fund until he was age 65. So he was back for, I guess, for the money from the WWE. And I didn't have a problem with him saying that. Who cares if he said that? I didn't get upset. I guess WWE and Vince McMahon didn't like his comments on HBO, so they released him. It was just it was stupid to do that. And the relationship between Vince and WWE and Roddy Piper was hurt for about over a year and a half, until the year 2005, when the WWE put Roddy Piper in his rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame. And before TNA, Roddy Piper worked for a XWF company that is run by, I guess, Hulk Hogan and Jimmy Hart started it. Or Hulk Hogan and Brian Knobbs started it. It was called the XWF. It was around in 2001, and I do have their DVDs. They only put on 3 shows on the DVD. It's 3 shows and a lot of bonus footage. Anyways, Roddy Piper was the XWF commissioner for their debut program in 2001. And Sable was even there in the ring with them, and Sable was the CEO. Storyline-wise, she wasn't the real CEO. It was just storyline-wise, and Piper was the commissioner of the XWF. But that did not last long because it never got a television deal and never got picked up. So it failed. And then he went to TNA, back to WWE in 2003. WWE released him. 2005, he got put in the Hall of Fame where he belongs. No doubt about it that he was a Hall of Famer in 2005. Roddy Piper was a Hall of Famer already in the 80s. He was already a Hall of Famer by the 80s. Roddy Piper has 4 children. 3 daughters and 1 son. He also had 4 grandchildren. That breaks my heart that his family has to go through this after losing him. He was not only a father and a husband, and from what I have been told and stories I've read, Roddy Piper was a great, great family man, and a great husband and a great father. So it's just heartbreaking that his kids don't have their father around anymore. He 61 years old, is too young to go. He should still be around. They don't have their father around anymore. And his wife doesn't have her husband around anymore. And his grandchildren are going to grow up and not know their grandfather anymore. I don't know how young his grandchildren are, but I feel bad for his wife and his children and his grandchildren. I feel really, really bad for them. I'm sure they're the ones, and his good friends in wrestling, like Ric Flair, I'm sure they're the ones that are taking this the hardest. His family and Ric Flair, and a couple other friends of his that were in wrestling. him and Hacksaw Jim Duggan became really close when they were on Legends House. So I'm sure Hacksaw Jim Duggan is not taking this well. Nobody is. I've heard from hundreds of wrestling fans on Twitter. I put out a tweet and put a picture up of them and said retweet if you miss Rowdy, if you're gonna miss Roddy Piper. And the retweet, probably up to 50 retweets. And before that, I've heard from just hundreds of wrestling fans on Twitter. They're all gonna miss Roddy Piper. Everybody is. He was a great wrestling villain and heel, and he was a great baby face. And he could draw money with anybody, heel or face. It didn't matter what he was. The fans loved him. All the wrestling fans respected Roddy Piper, and he will be missed forever. And he won't be forgotten. He will be remembered also forever. In my heart, for sure. Now I'm going to talk about... And then he would, after the Hall of Fame in 2005, he would stay working for the WWE from 2005 to 2015. His last Piper's Pit segment on Raw, I believe, was with Lana and Rusev. So, very sad we'll never see another Piper's Pit on Monday Night Raw. Now I'm going to talk about some of his accolades in his career. Roddy Piper has appeared in 43 movies. He did 43 movies. And I know him from this movie. It was like a wrestling movie. It was called Body Slam. He was in that. I think it was from 83 or 84. He was in that. He was also in They Live. I know him from that. And he's also in a movie that was on USA Network, I think in 2006. It was called Wise Guys. And he was also in that. And he was also in a movie called Super Sweet 16, the movie. I didn't know that, but he was in there. And that was Super Sweet 16, the movie was in 2006 when Roddy Piper was in that. Some of his finishing moves were the Bulldog headlock, poking his opponents in the eyes. He would always do that. That was just classic and funny as hell. And one of his finishing moves was the sleeper hold. And some of his nicknames in wrestling, of course, he's called the Rowdy One, the Hot Scott, and the Hot Rod. He managed, I don't know why I said I gotta stop doing that. He managed Paul Orndorff, David Schultz, and then when he came back in 03, he managed Sean O'Haire. I believe Sean O'Haire committed suicide, if I remember right. Or maybe he just died. I think he committed suicide. Very sad that he would do that, but he managed Virgil in 1991. I think he even trained Virgil to wrestle. Big John Studd he managed. He also managed Colin Delaney, who was in the WWE, I believe, was Colin Delaney. Now I'm going to talk about all the championships Roddy Piper has held in his wrestling career. And then I'll be done with this video. It's close to an hour, going on at 50 minutes already. I'm sorry it's so long, but I had a lot to talk about because Roddy Piper had a really long career. He debuted in 1969. And his last match, I believe, was WrestleMania 25 for the WWE. That was his last match, where he wrestled at WrestleMania 25 against Jericho in a tag team handicap match. And he also, when he returned in 03, he did wrestle one or two matches One was against Mr. America at Judgment Day '03. And it was Hulk Hogan, basically, against Roddy Piper again. And he wrestled on SmackDown from Madison Square Garden in the summer of '03. It was Piper and Sean O'Haire against the Los Guerreros, Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero Jr. I think that's for the tag team titles. Oh, and Roddy Piper would also wrestle, I think, in 2006 at Cyber Sunday pay-per-view, where him and Ric Flair became the World Tag Team Champions. So now I'm going to talk about the championships he has won in his career. Mid-Atlantic Wrestling and WCW Championships. He won the Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight Championship 3 times. The tag team titles 1 time with Big John Studd. And I believe these are called the NWA titles from Mid-Atlantic before they were WCW. And Jim Crockett Promotions before they became WCW. He was a television champion 2 times. And he was the NWA/WCW US Heavyweight Champion 3 times. So he had a great career in the NWA before he went to the WWF in '84. He was the NWA All-Star Wrestling NWA Canadian Tag Team Champion with Rick Martel. And they were the Canadian Tag Team Champions 1 time together. On to NWA Hollywood Wrestling. He was the NWA Americans Heavyweight Champion 5 times. He was a 7-time NWA Americans Tag Team Champion with partners Ron Bass, Adrian Adonis, Chavo Guerrero Sr., and a few other guys. So 7-time NWA Americans Tag Team Champion. NWA World Light Heavyweight Champion 1 time. NWA Pacific Wrestling. He was the NWA Pacific Heavyweight Champion 2 times. The NWA Pacific Tag Team Champions 5 times. 3 times. He was the NWA Pacific Tag Team Champion 3 times with Rick Martel. He was put in the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame and Museum in 2007. He was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Match of the Year in 1985 for WrestleMania 1 main event. He was the most hated wrestler of the year in 1984 and 85. He was the most inspirational wrestler of the year in 1982. And he was the most popular wrestler in 1986. And he was the WWE, WWF, whatever you want to call it, Intercontinental Champion in 1992. And he was the WWE World Tag Team Champion with Ric Flair in 2006. I hope I'm right on the year. I think it was '06 that him and Flair won the tag team titles. I know it was at a Cyber Sunday pay-per-view event. So, the loss of Roddy Piper is very, very, very sad, very tragic, and it's really, really too bad that he's left us so early in his life, because he could have lived another 10 to 20 years. I thought last time I saw Roddy Piper on television, it was last Friday. It was the Friday that Hulk Hogan was fired. Well, Roddy Piper was a guest on DirecTV's audience channel, The Rich Eisen Show. Roddy Piper was a guest on his show. I watched it, and Piper looked healthy to me. He looked pretty damn healthy, and he looked happy. So, just a real, real tragedy that Roddy Piper is no longer with us. The wrestling fans and the wrestling community and the wrestling business will miss Roddy Piper forever and ever. just rest in peace, Hot Rod. You will be missed by me for sure, and a lot of other people. We loved you. I loved you entertaining all of us. You entertained us for over 30 years. You were great. You were definitely in the top 10 or top 5 all-time most entertaining wrestlers. So, rest in peace, Hot Rod. And when it's my time to go, I hope to meet you someday with Randy Savage and Dusty Rhodes and all the other guys. I didn't get to meet you when you were alive. Sadly, I wish I would have got to meet Roddy Piper in person, but I never did. So hopefully in another life, I'll get to meet you, Hot Rod, and just say thank you for everything. Thank you for all the entertainment in wrestling. Thank you, Roddy Piper. We're gonna miss you. And this was my tribute to you, Hot Rod. Roddy Piper, you will be missed forever. Bye for now, everybody.